Elias Tren had never been particularly good at sleep, even in the regulated rhythm of artificial night aboard Kestrel 5, where a combination of sedatives in the recycled air and gentle light cycles were supposed to lull soldiers into compliance. He usually found himself half awake, halfway through an existential crisis, and halfway through a packet of something that used to be cheese. So when he woke at 3:17 station time, heart thumping and his bunk colder than it had any business being, he assumed it was the cheese again. What he didn't expect was the shadow at the edge of his room. "You're awake," she whispered. He blinked. He knew the silhouette immediately. Everyone did. There were murals of her on the walls of burned-out colonies, propaganda images filtered through 10 languages, and cautionary tales whispered during officer training. Sarava of Vilehold, the Iron Pulse Sovereign. The woman who once turned an entire planetary senate into carbon dust for interrupting her. "You're not supposed to be in here," Elias said eloquently. She tilted her head, long ears twitching slightly, and stepped closer. The emergency strip light at the base of the wall caught the curve of her face, the gleam of metal thread woven into her armor, and the faintest shimmer of something between starlight and menace in her eyes. "I know," she said. "Don't ask. Just follow me." He blinked again. "You say that like I'm not about to be court-martialed and possibly spaced for fraternizing with galactic royalty in my pajamas." She looked him up and down. "Those are pajamas?" "They're regulation sleepwear. They look like a punishment." Elias found himself slipping into his boots before his brain caught up with his hands. Protocol, logic, and self-preservation all tugged at him like panicked bureaucrats. But the part of him that had always been bored, always been dreaming, always been slightly stupid, that part said, "Why not?" And really, when an alien queen with rumored telekinetic abilities tells you to follow, the only proper response is to ask if she brought snacks. The hallway outside was empty, which didn't make sense. There were always patrols, always drones buzzing like judgmental mosquitoes. But the cameras had gone dark, the vents whispered oddly, and the artificial gravity had a subtle wobble that made him wonder if the ship itself was holding its breath. "Did you hack the station?" he asked, jogging to keep up with her. "Don't ask." "Right, sorry, I forgot the theme." They turned a corner and nearly collided with a cargo drone listing lazily against the wall. Its display screen read, "I am broken. Please do not judge me." Elias nodded respectfully. "Where are we going?" She hesitated just briefly. "Away." "That clears everything up. Thanks. So glad I left my extremely secure and officially approved bunk for this very specific destination." "You're amusing," she said. "I hear that a lot. Usually after people have had concussions." They reached the docking bay without tripping any alarms. Either she had help or Kestrel V's security system had finally given up after years of existential boredom. The shuttle waiting for them was sleek, old, and painted in the faded diplomatic colors of a treaty everyone had long since agreed to forget. Its loading ramp lowered with a sigh that sounded suspiciously like reluctance. "Did you steal that?" Elias asked. She looked at him. "No." That wasn't very convincing. She held out a small rectangular device. "Hold this." "What is it?" "It's the authorization code." He stared at it. "I don't have diplomatic clearance." "You do now." "That's not how clearance works." She leaned in, and for a moment he could see the exhaustion behind her eyes. Not weakness, something older, something burned into the bones. "Elias, either you come with me, or we both die in about 4 minutes. And if we're going to die, I'd prefer to do it on my terms, and not in your depressing sleepwear." "Still better than yours. Yours looks like it was designed by angry knives." She smiled then, just slightly. "You make dying less tedious." They boarded the shuttle. As soon as the hatch sealed, the internal lights flickered with the enthusiasm of something running on half a miracle and a lot of regret. The console sputtered to life. The AI's voice greeted them in a flat, weary tone. "Welcome to Diplomatic Shuttle Galanthus. Estimated probability of successful launch, 41%. "That's not comforting," Elias said, strapping himself into a seat that had clearly been designed for someone with more limbs and fewer safety concerns. "I've flown worse," Sarava replied, taking the helm. Her hands moved over the controls like they knew secrets the ship had forgotten. The engines groaned. The docking clamps hissed. Outside, nothing moved. Then, the bay doors opened, revealing the endless dark. The shuttle kicked off from Kestrel 5 with a lurch, and Elias's stomach remained politely behind. "Where are we actually going?" he asked, gripping the armrest. She didn't answer at first. Then, "To find something that was stolen." He waited. "You want to narrow that down?" "My future," she said. "That's incredibly vague and very melodramatic." She looked at him sidelong. "Would you prefer I said a secret galactic conspiracy involving your genetic code and a potential artificial intelligence uprising?" He blinked. "You know what? I take it back. The vague version was fine." Outside, the stars didn't blink. Inside, the shuttle's AI muttered to itself in binary. Sarava activated a stealth field, and the hull shimmered, reducing their visibility on scanners to just below coincidence. Elias looked at the queen beside him, the woman who once turned planetary tides with a sentence, and now sat in a stolen shuttle asking him to follow her into darkness. "So," he said, "what's your favorite color?" She blinked. "Why?" "We've got a few hours of interstellar silence ahead, and I figured we might as well make it weird." She stared at him, long ears twitching, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was quiet, unguarded, and real. "Black," she said. "Of course it is," he muttered. "Figures." "And yours?" "Blue," he said. "Like Earth oceans." "You've never seen them." "I've seen the photos. You have to admire a planet that keeps its dangerous creatures underwater and its worst creatures in Congress." She laughed again. The shuttle slipped into the folds of hyperspace, a speck fleeing a war it hadn't yet seen, guided by an alien queen with too many secrets and a soldier who had absolutely no idea what he was doing, but was doing it anyway, because sometimes the universe whispered, "Don't ask, just follow me," and all you could do was hope it wasn't a trap. Or at the very least, that the trap came with better snacks. The shuttle's stealth drive hummed like an embarrassed librarian, soft, persistent, and vaguely judgmental. Elias tried not to think about how many things could go wrong while drifting between mapped space and what Sarava called the feathered edge, which he gathered was a poetic way of saying a region where navigation AI cries and maps go to lie. He sat cross-legged in the back cabin, eating a protein brick that tasted like betrayal and watching the queen run diagnostics on a wall panel with quiet intensity. "I think this thing used to be a vending machine," he said, tapping the bulkhead with the wrapper. Sarava didn't look up. "Then it was promoted. I respect that. May I someday be reborn as a coffee dispenser?" "You'd be defective." "I'd be generous. Double shots, no charge. Wildly unpredictable foam." She gave him a glance, half amusement, half "why haven't I thrown you out of the airlock yet?" and then returned to the interface, which responded to her presence with a series of color pulses, probably ancient diplomatic protocol. Elias didn't understand half of it. He barely understood the other half. Most of what kept him upright was momentum and the vague sense that if he kept talking, nothing catastrophic could happen. "You going to tell me what you're really looking for?" he asked. "I already did. You said your future was stolen. That's not a mission briefing. That's a brooding lyric from a synth rock band." She exhaled through her nose. A long pause. Then, "There's a transmission. One that shouldn't exist. It came from a diplomatic frequency sealed 20 years ago, after the Treaty of Valar. It has your genetic signature." Elias blinked. "I'm sorry. My what now?" "Your DNA, your voice pattern, your retinal imprint. Not a simulation, not a recording. Real-time command code sent under your name. 6 days ago. I've never even been to Valar. No one has, not since the treaty fell apart. That's why it matters." He leaned back against the padded wall and stared at the ceiling, which was trying to flicker meaningfully. "So either someone's pretending to be me, or there's a second me out there with better posture. Or someone is growing them. Ah, clones. Great. I always wanted a twin who could do my taxes. It's more likely they're grown for infiltration. You were nobody. You remain almost nobody. No offense." "None taken. I pride myself on being aggressively forgettable. That makes you perfect." You're invisible in plain sight. No one would suspect a soldier of no rank, no clearance, no legacy. They've built you to be ignored." Elias whistled softly. "That's a hell of a motivational speech. You were born to be irrelevant. Congratulations." She looked at him. "You're not irrelevant now." "You just said, you're not irrelevant to me." The words hung there, surprisingly heavy. Elias opened his mouth to make a joke, then wisely shut it. The Queen had a way of landing words like precision strikes. She wasn't flirting exactly. She was just honest, like a blade or a surgical laser. They dropped out of stealth for a short-range jump into the Anemoist Drift, a field of space debris orbiting a dead dwarf star. Once the area had hosted a research station. Now it hosted a loose collection of obsolete tech, broken satellites, and the haunting melodies of classical alien radio frequencies looping into eternity. Somewhere amid the debris, Sarova guided the shuttle toward a small outpost embedded in a hollowed asteroid. "No signal," she said, scanning. "Maybe it's a trap." "Everything is a trap. The goal is to walk through it slower than the teeth can close." "That's deeply comforting." "Stay behind me." "I would have done that anyway." "You have a sword." They docked manually, the process involving more shouting from the shuttle AI and a wrench Elias wasn't qualified to use. When the airlock hissed open, stale oxygen greeted them like an old, mildly disappointed uncle. The corridor beyond flickered under emergency lights. Signs were in 7 languages, all of them spelling out various synonyms of "do not proceed without clearance." Naturally, they proceeded. Sarova's footsteps made no sound. Elias's made many. He couldn't help it. His boots were loud, his breathing was louder, and his existential panic was practically shouting. They reached a control room with an active console, surprisingly pristine. Sarova moved to it immediately, her fingers gliding across controls like a pianist with a grudge. Elias hovered by a chair labeled Ambassador Temporary and sat with as much dignity as one could in a half-collapsed swivel seat. A hollow screen flared to life. Static at first, then a figure, vague, silhouetted, face obscured. The voice was his, absolutely, unmistakably his. "This is Elias Tren, identification code in 207 Sigma. Orders to proceed with protocol RX Prime. Alliance collapse scheduled. Initiate within 72 hours. Elias stood up too fast. The chair fell over, dramatically unhelpful. "That's not me. That's not me." "Calm," Sarova said, but even her voice held tension. The message ended. The console displayed a log of outgoing transmissions, 4 in total, all sent to major Alliance command centers, all encoded with human military clearance Elias absolutely did not have. "Why would someone use me?" he asked. "Because you're not a diplomat. You're not a general. You're not even trusted enough to be monitored, which means your template was easy to steal." He ran both hands through his hair. "I was this close to requesting a transfer to a mess hall ship. I could have been frying synthetic eggs and not unraveling galactic diplomacy." Sarova looked at him, and her voice dropped into something soft. "You still can. If you want to leave." "I don't want to leave. I want to understand why someone out there thought I was a good face for starting a war." She nodded once sharply. "Then we follow the next signal. It was bounced through a relay on Veltrinar. If we're lucky, it's still active. If we're lucky, it's just a bureaucratic error and some really bored hackers. If we're lucky, we're both wrong, and this is just a very elaborate surprise party." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Would you ever throw a surprise party?" She didn't blink. "Once. It ended in 3 arrests, a space eel infestation, and a temporary Alliance collapse. But the cake was excellent." He grinned despite himself. They returned to the shuttle, which had begun playing smooth jazz over the comms for reasons it refused to disclose. Elias took the co-pilot seat this time. As they lifted off from the dead station, he glanced at her. "Thanks for not throwing me out the airlock." She gave him a sideways glance. "Yet." He grinned again. The stars opened before them. Somewhere out there was a shadow wearing his name, and he intended to look it straight in the face, if only to tell it that his wardrobe was outdated and his voice could use more bass. But he wasn't alone. He had a queen at his side, an interstellar mystery on their heels, and the faint, absurd hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something more than just surviving. The shuttle rattled like it had just remembered how old it was. Every panel groaned in protest as they exited hyperspace near Veltrinar, a system so thoroughly abandoned, even space pirates left it off their maps. Sarava adjusted the inertial dampeners with an air of annoyed royalty, as if the ship's resistance to stable flight was a personal insult. Elias, in the co-pilot seat, braced against another lurch. Are we landing or being shaken like a cosmic snow globe? Try not to die dramatically, she replied. Dramatically, as opposed to, what, a tasteful faint? The ruins of Veltrinar's orbital ring drifted into view, its once glittering stations reduced to shards of mirrored hull and twisted conduits. Somewhere in that mess, a faint signal pulsed. Same encrypted frequency as before, same genetic signature, same impossible echo of him. Still not convinced I'm not adopted by some secret galactic cult, he muttered. They wouldn't have taken you, Sarava said. Too many jokes. Cults hate jokes. That's fair. They docked with a surviving fragment of the orbital core, a habitat ring mostly intact but with atmosphere so thin even their suits coughed. Sarava led the way through a cracked corridor, weapon drawn. Her long ears twitched with every creak. Elias stayed close, one hand on the pulse pistol she'd insisted he carry, even though he still wasn't sure if it was loaded or decorative. They reached a chamber alive with light. A central terminal pulsed, emitting the same soft chime every 5 seconds. Around it stood stasis pods, 4 of them. Inside each, a human. Correction, inside each, him. Elias took a step back. Okay, I don't remember signing a release form for this cloning operation. That's definitely illegal. And creepy. Mostly creepy. Sarava was already scanning the pods, her face still, eyes flicking from data stream to data stream. Not just clones, simulants. Biotech replicas, preloaded with memory overlays. Imperfect. One has a scar you never had. Another's too tall. One's missing your sense of sarcasm. Monster, Elias whispered. Someone's been manufacturing you for infiltration. These were never meant to last. Fast-grown, biologically unstable, likely to disintegrate within weeks. He frowned. So, what's the point? She turned to him. They send a simulant into a secure facility. It transmits a message. The facility traces it to you. You're blamed. No one questions the evidence. No one looks deeper. Alliances fracture. Blame is assigned. War resumes. Elegant, he muttered, in a psychotic, deeply unethical sort of way. Behind them, the chamber's door slid shut. A voice filled the air, calm and amused. Welcome, Elias Tren, Queen Sarava. You're right on time. The hollow projector flickered. A man appeared. Not Elias, not exactly. Older, harder. The version of Elias that might have survived 100 wars and decided humor was inefficient. Who the hell? Elias began. I'm you, the projection said. Version Alpha, the prototype, the first template. They built me during the first truce in case the peace ever turned inconvenient. Elias raised a hand. Whoa, pause. You're telling me I'm a copy of you? Number. You're real. You were the cover. They took your DNA from a survey team report. Your life was unimportant enough to pass unnoticed. I was built from your genome, trained to act, talk, and think like you, but smarter, stronger, more obedient. That last one clearly didn't take, Elias said. I went rogue, Alpha said. I saw what they intended, a perfect tool to collapse peace whenever needed. So I hid, built my own copies, not for sabotage, but for misdirection. A game of echoes. Sarava stepped forward. You're the one who sent the transmission? Alpha nodded. A warning, disguised as a threat. I needed to draw someone to me. Someone unpredictable. Someone flawed. Elias frowned. Ah, you remembered my resume. I remembered who I used to be before they weaponized me. The pods hissed. One simulant stirred, eyelids fluttering. Alpha gestured and the system powered down. The clones would never wake. Elias felt a strange grief, like watching bad reflections dissolve. Alpha turned to him. You've already done what I couldn't. You were noticed, trusted. You had her, he glanced at Sarava, by your side. That means they won't try again. You're not invisible anymore. I miss being invisible, Elias said. I could eat noodles in peace. Be better than me, Alpha said. Live. That's the rebellion. Then he stepped into the console. Not figuratively, his projection merged with the terminal, and for the briefest moment, the light dimmed as the data core fried itself into oblivion. Gone. No trail, no backup. Elias stared at the empty chamber. Was that a dramatic self-deletion or just really bad software maintenance? Both, Sarava murmured. They left the station in silence. Not the heavy kind, the thoughtful kind. Back on the shuttle, Elias sat cross-legged again, but this time with tea. Not recycled water or regret-flavored bricks. Actual tea. Sarava had apparently stolen it from a diplomat's pantry 5 years ago and kept it for emergencies. I think this qualifies, she said. I'd call this several emergencies, he replied, sipping. So, we've got a rogue clone conspiracy dismantled, the Alliance war derailed, and I now officially exist in 4 separate file folders in the Galactic archives. 5, she said. Right. Forgot the embarrassing karaoke incident. She smiled and it wasn't tired. What will you do now? He looked at her. I don't know, but I'm thinking maybe I don't go back. To Earth? To the old job, the quiet bunk, the illusion of peace. I thought I was just one guy with no clearance and a snacking habit. Turns out I'm a strategic risk with a sense of humor. You could stay with me? He raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me to join your secret monarchy of alien vengeance and occasional sarcasm? I'm asking you to be my advisor. He blinked. I don't know anything about diplomacy. You know enough to keep me laughing. He grinned. Well then, Your Majesty, I humbly accept, on the condition that I never wear anything with shoulder pads. Agreed. Outside the window, stars streamed past. No longer the cold indifference of space. Now they look like routes, possibilities, roads not mapped but waiting to be walked. And he wasn't alone. Elias Tren, once invisible, now mattered. Not because of what he was made from, or what others had planned, but because when asked to follow into the unknown, he had said yes. And in that yes, 100 lies had unraveled. A war had stalled, and a queen had smiled, not for diplomacy or power, but because someone had made her laugh when the galaxy forgot how. Not bad for a man in ugly pajamas.